Tom Allen's got something good going on in Bloomington, Indiana. We'll see if he can keep it up in 2021 and beyond. Mark Rogers TV, the voice of college football, breaking down the game we all love each and every day. Best discussion, debate, and analysis. That's our aim. That's our goal. That's our mission. We've had some great conversations in the past with Paul Gable from the Hoosier.com on the Rivals platform. And Paul, we welcome you back in here post-National Signing Day.
Yes, sir. Thanks for having me, Mark.
Absolutely. Good to see you. And for Indiana, I think in the mold of what we saw under Mark D'Antonio at Michigan State and have seen forever under the likes of Barry Alvarez and on through the Wisconsin coaches, Tom Allen may be forming a Big Ten power where you're just going to have to say, you know what, forget the recruiting rankings. We don't care if it was 25th or 55th. We know that they're going to show up next fall and compete for a Big Ten championship. It seems like he's molding that kind of program, looking at the rankings according to Rivals with 2 4-stars, 11 3-stars, a 12th rated class in the Big Ten, a 62nd rated class in the nation. That's not going to impress anyone. But again, it seems like he's building this thing in the mold of those two programs.
Yeah, he is definitely. You know, one thing about this class and the ranking, I think a lot of that had to do with the fact that it's only 15 guys. It's not a huge class. You know, if it was maybe 25 to 30 guys, that ranking may jump up a little bit. Tom Allen made it very clear early on that this was going to be a small class. Made it clear very early on that it's not his MO to sign guys just to sign guys. And you know, I don't want to say, and Tom would never say this, but to string guys along. You know, he went after however many guys they needed to replace that initially it looked like would move on before the NCAA granted another year. But you're absolutely right to your opening point, Mark. He is building something special in Bloomington, and he's doing it. And you go back and you look even this year, All-American Micah McFadden, a guy who was not highly recruited coming out of high school from Tampa. Tywan Mullen, another guy who wasn't highly recruited coming out of high school, also an All-American. So, you know, Tom has done a great job, and his staff have done a great job of getting maybe the lower level 3-star and a 4-star and really doing a good job of developing those guys. And, you know, I go back to the Wisconsin and the Ohio State game, especially the Ohio State game with all their upper 4- and 5-star guys. And you know, IU went toe-to-toe with them in the second half. And if that game was, you know, maybe 2 minutes shorter or 2 minutes longer, could have been a different outcome.
Got Paul Gable on the line from the Hoosier.com on Rivals, talking up Indiana football. Malachi Bennett, 3-star wide receiver out of Alabama. He was the last one under the wire, and it's a good flip that Indiana got there. Yeah,
huge pickup for them. He is the third wide receiver out of that class. Malachi initially had committed to UAB. I think a lot of that had to do with the fact that maybe initially he thought he wanted to play close to home, but he had developed a great relationship with Coach Allen and wide receiver Coach Grant Hurd. And over time, that relationship really took off. And for about the last month or so, he had known that it was going to be Indiana, that IU was head and shoulders above everyone else. And then yesterday at noon on signing day, which to me that seemed a little weird. Signing day happened in December. It seemed like that's when IU got the bulk of their guys. But at noon yesterday, he signed and wraps up a very nice 2021 class when you look at the talent that they were able to get and some of the holes that they were able to fill.
So what would be kind of the highlights, whether you want to go the player route or the position route, where Indiana shored things up for 21 and beyond?
Yeah, they got 5 4-star guys. Malachi Bennett, got a quarterback of the future, Donovan McCulley, who, according to our recruiting experts at Rivals, they say he has more upside than Michael Penix does, and that is incredible to believe. And they made no bones about throwing McCulley's name and Heisman in the same sentence. Now, granted, a lot of things can happen in 3 to 4 years. Another wide receiver in Jaquez Smith, defensive back Larry Smith the third, and wide receiver Jordan Williams out of Texas. Those are your 4-star guys. Wound up signing 10 offensive players, 4 defensive players, and then Tom went the international route again to find his punter, James Evans out of New Zealand, who had never been to the States until he enrolled at IU last month.
Well, there's a constant churn of players and talent in college football. Obviously, these guys only stick around for 2 to 3 to 4 years. So let's talk about the next wave that's headed from Indiana to the NFL. And even though one mode of thinking would be, hey, they're gone, they're off, it doesn't really matter. But that recruiting pitch of, hey, look at what we're doing in developing players to get to the NFL draft, certainly something that Indiana can rely on. We got Stevie Scott, Jamar Johnson are 2 that come to mind. Whop Philyor, you, of course, mentioned to me before we started to record, he of Burger King fame. Yeah, so your thoughts about how those guys project to the next level?
Yeah, I mean, Jamar and Whop probably have the best chance. I was surprised, honestly, with Stevie Scott, only because he would have been a junior. He is a junior, would have been a senior coming back. I thought maybe he would have wanted to go at it one more year, especially this year. You know, there were times this season when you looked at IU where they struggled offensively, especially to generate a running game. And Stevie's numbers, while great, weren't as good as maybe his freshman and a sophomore year. I thought there were a lot of times when Stevie got hit and fell down immediately instead of trying to, blow through a tackle and pick up a few more yards. I would have liked to have seen Stevie stay one more year to get that experience under his belt. But, obviously he had to like what he heard or else, he wouldn't have left. Whop, early projections have Whop about a 7th-round guy. It's not a bad thing to go undrafted and get picked up as a free agent, as you know. And then Jamar, whatever team is lucky enough to get him either through draft or the day after day 3 of the draft through free agency is going to get a tremendous guy who will do everything that you ask on and off the field, kind of a lunch pail mentality, and will get after it and will make a name for himself on a defense somewhere.
Yeah, rather than being a low draft pick, you can survey those offers that are coming in from free agency. When you get a lot of these guys will get 5 or 6 offers, they can look at rosters, they can gain insight and to see, okay, what's the best fit for me to compete for a job? No question about that. Paul Gable, thehoosier.com, talking up Indiana football. Please join him and the rest of the staff at Rivals. You got a new defensive coordinator. He comes in from one of the most talent-laden and respected programs in the nation at Georgia in replacing Cade Womack.
Yeah, Charlton Warren was the former defensive back coach at Georgia, and it was a name that, I think took a lot of people by surprise at first, and then you look at where he's been. Georgia, the last 2 years was at Tennessee, was at Florida, was a former player and defensive coordinator at Air Force Academy, spent 10 years on active duty in the Air Force. And it was a hire that, as I said, I think shocked some people. But then when you listen to Tom Allen and then you listen to Coach Warren, one thing that Tom had said all along was he wasn't going to rush it and he was going to look for his fit. And that's absolutely what he got here. And Coach Warren, has those recruiting connections down south. You don't coach in the SEC and not build relationships at some of those high schools down there the way that he has, and it's already paid dividends. He's formally announced the middle of last month, and they're already going after some 4- and 5-star guys going up against the SEC powerhouses and the ACC powerhouses for some recruits. And Coach Warren was asked about that at his introductory press conference. And he said, in order to win, you got to be able to get in the ring, throw some punches, mix it up with some of these powerhouses. Not to say we're going to get every guy, but if we don't attempt, we're never going to get. And I'll go to Alaska. If there's a player there, I'll go to Alaska and go watch this guy. And that is a mentality that I think Tom and you and I talked about this a little bit before we came on. It's a mentality that Tom has tried to preach a little bit, and it's very, very nice to see a guy like Coach Warren, who has been there and done that at some of your elite football programs in America, come in and pick up the ball and just run with it, no pun intended. And I think, over time, IU is going to start to compete with the Michigans, the Ohio States, the Penn States, even Minnesota for some of those upper echelon guys in the Big Ten.
Yeah, so it's interesting what you just pointed out there, Paul, because I likened this program to what Wisconsin's done over the last 25 years. And we see where Wisconsin under Paul Chryst was recruiting their typical classes in the high 30s, 40s, 50 range, but still turning them into 10-win teams. Well, they brought in a 15th ranked class this year, and I heard Paul Chryst say exactly what you just stated. We're getting to a place where we're still going to do our thing in our model. We're not going to chase recruiting rankings and stars just to do it, but we're also not going to back away from the 5-star. If we're going to feel like we can be elite, we can get in the ring and not think like, we can't get that guy. No, we're going to go do it. And I think that's the way to approach it, what you're talking about with Tom Allen. We're not going to chase the stars. We're going to develop 3 stars. And if we really like a kid and he's a 2-star, we'll go get him. But we're not going to shy away from the battle and show that, hey, we've arrived. We're here to put up a fight for the best players in the nation as well.
Right. Yeah, you're absolutely right. I've never been a guy who's put a lot of stock into stars. I think, depending on when you see a kid, the kid can either look really good or really bad. I always go back to a year in a college weight room for an incoming freshman makes all the difference in the world. And you never know how great a kid is going to be until he's tested on that level. I've seen a lot of kids who looked horrible at high school that, flipped the switch and turned it on when they got to college. And a lot of guys who were Mr. Football and a lot of other accolades in high school that never did a thing in college.
And that's the thing. For as difficult as it is to project a college player to the NFL, they're almost grown men at that point. By the time they play 3 or 4 years in college, they just are going to a higher level of football, a little bit more sophisticated. But to go from high school, when these kids are recruited at 16 and 17 years old, to what they're going to be at 19 and 20, oh my goodness, some of them have already hit their ceiling. Others have so much room to grow. They're going to be a different guy in 3 years.
Well, Mark, I'll give you a prime example. There was a kid at my high school in South Carolina. He was a couple of years behind me, 6'7", 300-pound offensive lineman, slow, not good for small high school, but got a lot of SEC, ACC offers, wound up signing with South Carolina when Holtz was there because they saw size. The kid got 2 Outback Bowl rings because they won those games, never played a snap in 4 years. Come on.
So you're talking 2000, 2001 against Ohio State, those 2 Outback Bowls. Yep.
Yeah, and you know, colleges were beating down the door because they saw 6'7", 300 pounds, and that's something that you can't coach. And you know, once he got on the field against men and against people who weren't impressed, he fell by the wayside.
Exactly. That's the recruiting game. Got to project, and that's a difficult thing to do. Paul Gable on the line from the Hoosier.com on Rivals. Paul, we appreciate you stopping by to talk up Tom Allen and IU.
Hey, no problem. Thanks for having me, Mark. And real quick, you had mentioned the schedule. It's going to be, it's assuming we get back to some normalcy before September 4th. It's going to be a tough opening stretch there for IU. At Iowa, and you better believe that Tom Allen and IU has that game circled because, you know, I'm sure they still believe Gary Barta kept them out of a New Year's Six. But that's going to be a tough test, and you come home September 11th for a game against Idaho, the first time in program history that IU has played Idaho. And then week 3, Cincinnati comes to town. And what could, you know, if everything goes right for both teams, could easily be a top 10 matchup in Bloomington.